Welcome to our first open forum for Vice President for Research Candidates. Today we have with us Dr. Grant McJimsey. He is currently Vice President for Research at Kent State, where he's been for almost 4 years. He's incorporated some interesting ideas there that I think he'll probably be sharing with you. He comes via Canada, where he is from, and received his PhD in chemistry from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. He spent 4 years with the chemistry division at the National Research Council in Ottawa before entering academia at Worcester Polytech Institute. And also at Worcester Polytech Institute, he was the director of the Bioengineering Institute. You all have his bio, so I'll let you read the details, and I'll like you to welcome Dr. McJimsey.
Thanks very much, Julie. I've never seen so many photos of myself in one room. It's a little bit daunting, actually. No, I really appreciate the chance to come to University of New Mexico and visit with the university, visit with faculty and staff, and hopefully some students too, and tell you a little bit about who I am and what my goals are as a VP of Research at Kent State, and what my philosophy is in terms of research, university research, and then tell you a little bit about some of the things I've done at Kent State to kind of put that philosophy into action. So as Julie said, I'm Canadian originally. You probably can hear some inflections in my voice. I spent 22 years in Massachusetts though, and so I now have this kind of strange amalgamation of Boston accent and Canadian accent. So if you hear me say the car or car keys, you'll know I've spent some time in Boston. So I did my education in Canada. I moved to Massachusetts in 1989 as a faculty member in the Department of Chemistry. Have basically been a faculty member ever since and a researcher ever since. I'm very passionate about research, very interested in how universities conduct research and the impact that universities can have on our society as a result of the research that they do. And I should say right at the beginning, you know, when I say research, I also mean scholarship. I also mean creative activities. I mean, universities are broad institutions. They have many disciplines, and what some people think of as research, others think of as scholarship, artists might think of as musical composition. They're all very scholarly activities, and they're all a very big part of what a university is. So in terms of my background at WPI, I was both a faculty member and an administrator for the last 6 years at WPI. I was the director of the Bioengineering Institute, as Julie said, which was an organization established to help pull technologies out of the laboratories at WPI and get them into some kind of commercializable format. And so I spent a lot of time looking for dollars in Washington and in the state to get some research and development funding so that we could kind of convert some of the technologies that we've been developing, mostly in the engineering laboratories, but also in the science laboratories, into some kind of commercial technology, something that could be recognized as a viable and useful technology and be taken out and commercialized. During those were the last 6 years of my time at WPI. During those 6 years, I was also Associate Provost for Research, essentially the WPI version of VP Research. So I had some experience in the central administration as well. In 2011, I got the chance to kind of expand. I basically kind of felt I'd done what I could do at a relatively small institution, and I wanted to experience the research enterprise at a larger institution, and so I ended up at Kent State, a much more comprehensive institution from a research perspective than WPI, much larger institution, 43,000 students, probably in the order of 12 to 1,400 faculty overall. And it's been a great experience. I've learned a lot about research administration. I've learned a lot about bringing together disparate disciplines to work on interesting projects together, to bring complementary skills into projects that are ultimately important to the general public. And that's kind of the philosophy that I have. I think that universities, I believe strongly that universities should be working to solve the big challenges that we have as a society. And there are some big ones out there. I think that if you think of the things that are challenging us as Americans, we're being challenged by the availability of energy. We're being challenged by basically a loss of our environment, our physical environment. We're being challenged by climate change. So those are big challenges. Those are actually global challenges. And I guess my belief is that the institution in our society that is most appropriate to be solving those challenges, working on those challenges, is the university. It's got the biggest concentration of brains of any institution in our society. It has the broadest range of disciplines and skills of any institution in our society. So I think it falls to the university to lead in trying to solve those big challenges that we have as a society. Climate change, energy, environment is one. Human health is another. We have actually, in America, we have a pretty good healthcare system. How do we maintain the quality of that? How can we increase the quality of our healthcare? How can we make it accessible to all Americans? How can we do that in an affordable way? Those are big challenges. And actually, how do we extend our healthcare to the world? I mean, global health is a huge issue. We've seen that with the Ebola epidemic in Africa. It touches us. We're not insulated from things that happen halfway around the world. They're very immediate to us. And so that's another large problem that we have as a society, and I think it's our responsibility, again, as a university, to be working to solve those challenges, working together with other universities, working with partners like government and industry, but I think it's our responsibility to lead those efforts. And again, I think we're the most appropriate institution. I mean, we have so many different ways of looking at problems. We can approach problems from many different directions. So there are aspects of climate change that involve political science as well as engineering. There are aspects of human health that involve sociology, that involve the arts, as well as medicine. So there are many, many different skill sets, many different disciplines that need to be used and leveraged in trying to solve these big problems. And I think it's our responsibility to do that. So that's one goal that I think that university as an institution, not necessarily just the University of New Mexico, but all universities that are research universities, that's one goal that we should be shooting for. We should be shooting for solving these big challenges. I think another goal that we should have as a university is improving the quality of life, not just the health of the regional population or of the state or of the country, but the cultural quality of life. We should be making life interesting for people outside the university. There are so many interesting things that happen inside the university that we really don't even share them with people outside the university. It is so, all the things that are happening in the arts, in anthropology, in engineering, in medicine, in chemistry, some of those things are really cool. Some of them are kind of boring. If you're a chemist, some chemistry is pretty boring, but I can say that because I'm a chemist. But there are some really cool things happening, but we don't share that with people. There's such an opportunity for the university to enrich the lives of the people in our community, and we should be looking at that as our responsibility. We should be doing more outreach to the community. We should be telling them more about what it is that we do here in the university. Yes, we educate the next generation of Americans at the university, but we also enrich the lives of all generations of Americans. I think we need to be doing that. A third goal, I think, for a research university should be using the research that is generated at the university to drive economic development, particularly regional economic development. In some ways, all universities are regional institutions. I'm at Kent State. It's a regional institution. It sees Northeast Ohio as its constituency. University of New Mexico, I understand, sees the entire state as its constituency, as it should. But I think that we need to be involved in driving the economic development of our regions as universities. And there's a lot of ways we can do that. Technology development, through consulting, through partnering with, in New Mexico, partnering with the National Labs, Sandia and Los Alamos, and the Air Force labs, partnering with them. There's lots of ways that we can bring our brain power to the development of new things that create new jobs and actually increase the economic health of the region. So those are kind of three areas that I think a research university should be involved in, that we should be leading. We should be leading these efforts, not following, but we should be leading them. As Vice President for Research at Kent State, I see it as my job to help the university achieve those goals. And frankly, what that really boils down to is helping each faculty member on an individual basis be successful in their research, their scholarship, their creative activities. Because, there are a lot of brains at this institution, but each person has different needs in terms of developing their research and scholarship, and I think it's up to the research administration, up to the Vice President for Research, to really help each faculty member with their own specific needs and provide them with the resources that they need. And so, as part of my job at Kent State, what I've done is create a research development unit or initiative, which really is kind of an advanced form or an aggressive form of faculty mentoring. So what we're doing is we're reaching out to faculty on an individual basis, finding out what their research interests are, finding out what their research skills are, because sometimes those are not always the same, finding out what they are, and then finding out what it is that they need in order to go forward with that research. So we have a variety of programs that we've created. We have a Connect the Dots program where we join or put together faculty from across the institution. We identify what their skill sets are, and we look for ways of complementing their skills with the skills of other faculty. So we have a Connect the Dots program. We have a variety of funding opportunity programs where we identify funding opportunities, where we put together faculty into teams to answer large calls for proposals. We have a number of proposal review processes in place. So we have a mock NIH study section that we run twice a year, where we take faculty who have R01 awards from NIH and we put them in a room with other faculty. Those other faculty present their specific aims to the panel, and they get their specific aims critiqued in real time. We also do that for NSF, more NSF kind of focused faculty. We have something called a revised and resubmit program, where we identify faculty who have submitted a proposal in the past, have not had it funded, and perhaps for whatever reason have not resubmitted it. We find out who those faculty are, why they haven't resubmitted it, and what do they need in order to resubmit. Do they need some pilot funding? Do they need to have that proposal sent out for an external review to get a better critique? So there are a number of those processes that we put in place as well. We also have a postdoc program, a postdoc support program, where we run a competition on an annual basis to award postdoctoral support. So faculty write proposals. Over the 3 phases, or the 3 years we've done this, we've had 140 proposals submitted by faculty for the support of the salary and benefits of a postdoc or postdocs for 1 or more years. We evaluate the proposals. They're technical proposals. We evaluate those internally. Faculty evaluate them. And then we make awards for the support of the postdocs. We've supported 36 so far. So we've created 36 new postdoctoral positions in the university with this support. They're all 2-year, with the exception of 5, they're all 2-year postdoc positions. So, and those have been spread across 6 or 7 different colleges. So this is a way for us to create a postdoctoral culture in the university. It's a way for us to provide faculty with greater capacity to write more proposals and manage more grants. And it's really a way to ultimately increase the amount of funding that comes into the university. So a number of programs that we put into place in order to kind of move the needle, I guess, is what you'd say, in terms of the research that the university does. I'd like this to be a conversation. I don't want to talk too long. this is a really nice, sized group, and I'd be really happy to answer questions that you might have about me, about what I've done. You have a question?
We need questions to go to the microphone.
Oh, yeah, because we're being recorded here. So if you have a question, please, I guess I'll just turn it around this way, or? Okay. I'll bring it to you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Some of these programs that you just mentioned, these were at Kent University.
Yes.
They really sound very interesting, but how many faculty do you have? Because if you have one faculty submitting 10 proposals and none get funded, and it becomes a problem,
Yeah,
so
it's
how many
usually,
faculty do you have there?
Well, why don't we just leave this here, because nobody has taken the front seats of the church here.
They're shy, they won't ask anything.
Well, we have so Kent State is an interesting institution. There's the Kent campus, which has 27,000 students on it and about 625 tenure and tenure track faculty, as well as about the same number of non-tenure track faculty. And then there are 8 other regional campuses. But the bulk of the research and the bulk of the proposal writing happens at the Kent campus. We submitted last year about 600 proposals as a university, to all agencies. We don't have an engineering school at Kent State, and we don't have a medical school at Kent State. So, we're perhaps a little bit more NSF focused than NIH focused. It's not a small number of faculty, but it's not an infinite number of faculty either. And so, as part of this kind of our research development effort, we've been going around and talking to faculty one-on-one, and building essentially a database of faculty skill sets and faculty interests. And it's allowed us to identify some really interesting teams of faculty. I'll give you a couple of examples. We acquired a college of podiatric medicine about 2 years ago. It's for feet. And it didn't do any research, but one of my jobs is to try to introduce research into the college. And I went up and I talked to a clinician there, and I asked him, what was it that podiatric medicine needed, and didn't have? And he said, we really would like to have a sensor that could be worn by early stage diabetics to monitor the circulation in their feet, so they could self-monitor. And so I knew a guy because we created this database in our Liquid Crystal Institute, and I put him together with a faculty member in our fashion school, and they created a sock. You put liquid crystals onto a special material, a textile that was chosen by the fashion school faculty member, and it changes color according to temperature. So you actually can put it on your foot, and the vasculature lights up in the foot a different color. So, having talked to each of these faculty separately, individually, and learning what it is they could do, that allowed us to kind of put together that team. And we've got a patent pending on it, and we're trying to start a company around it. We've got a couple of proposals out to fund it further. That was funded internally by a postdoc. That's one example. Another one was we have a very strong stress research program, mostly in the psychology department. And I get calls for proposals coming across my desk all the time, and I got this one from NIH, and it was about stress. And I shipped it over to a colleague in the psychology department. I said, can you address this? And he said, I can only address about 20% of this. So what we did was we identified 4 more people who could fill in the gaps. We got a proposal. It's being evaluated now, a 5 PI proposal. Each PI only had to write 4 pages, so they loved it. It's a program that answers the call rather than, ordinarily a faculty member would look at it and just throw it out or just, put it in the delete file. But knowing this about our faculty allows us to start putting these teams together. I think it is very labor intensive because you need to talk, 45 minutes to an hour with each faculty member and find out what it is that they are interested in, but more importantly, what it is that they can do. So I'm a photochemist by original training. I don't do photochemistry anymore. I do surface chemistry. But if somebody needs a photochemist, then I can help them. And that's kind of the idea behind this.
Thank you.
Do I have to bring this down to you guys? Yeah, here we go.
I got it.
All right.
The School of Engineering does a lot of DoD-centric research, and one of the reasons we do that too is because we have Kirtland Air Force Base, and a lot of the AFRL labs are located here. Likewise, Kent State is close to Dayton, and a little far away, but in the same state, and you have Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the other AFRL directorate. Have there been initiatives on your part to extend research from Kent State onto that AFRL that you can try to do the same?
Yeah, we actually have several individual relationships with the Air Force Lab there. You know, there are about 6 universities between Kent State and Wright-Pat. Okay, so there's a fair amount of competition, and Wright-Pat is actually pretty close to Wright State, University of Dayton, and The Ohio State University. So it's a pretty competitive landscape, but we do have individual relationships there. I've been kind of focusing on maybe a little bit lower hanging fruit, and so I built a relationship with the Cleveland Clinic, which is 30 miles away from Kent State, where we've basically started a pilot research program. I've put some money into a pot. My counterpart at the Cleveland Clinic puts money into a pot, and then we fund collaborative proposals. We've done that with Northeast Ohio Medical University as well. We've actually got an initiative for clinical and translational research going with several of the hospitals in Akron, which is about 15 miles away from Kent. So, I mean, you kind of look for your opportunities. We don't have an engineering school at Kent State, so the sorts of relationships with DoD labs are really run through physics, chemistry, Liquid Crystal Institute, you know, some of the more physical sciences part of it. But we definitely look to have those, and I would see, you know, Los Alamos and Sandia and the Air Force labs here, they should be really big. I'm sure they are big partners of the university. And I would see it as a great opportunity to expand the research. I mean, obviously they're drivers of the economy in the state. I think it's really important for the university to be closely allied with those. I mean, they're federally supported. New Mexico, in a way, is like Ohio. It's an important state politically. So, yeah, I would see that as something that would definitely be beneficial. Okay. I didn't know how I was going to get the mic in there. So.
Would you also introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Abhay Date. I'm the chair of chemical and biological engineering. And I was curious because all of the folks on campus who get any kind of support from the VPR office obviously feel they don't get enough money. So when you talked about new initiatives, I wonder if you know what you would cut to make those possible. Are they expensive initiatives or are they not too expensive?
Well, you know, some of them are sunk costs. Okay, so you know, this idea of connecting the dots in the Rolodex. I mean, those salaries I'm already paying, and basically I was kind of one of the persons that was doing that was also my tech transfer person. So she was out mining for disclosures in the departments and was just found out she was talking more about research, and so it was kind of a natural thing to do. Another person doing the R&D stuff is he works half-time for me. He's a full professor in psychology. So I'm kind of leveraging costs that have already, you know, been incurred. The postdoc program was an expensive program. I got $1.8 million from the president and the provost to run a 3-year pilot. And I leveraged that and got about the same amount from the departments and colleges to kind of match. We could go from 1-year postdoc to 2-year postdocs. Ultimately, to continue that, it has to run off of F&A. And you know, so what we're trying to do is, you know, fund people with these postdoc dollars that are most likely to generate F&A in the short term. So we have to kind of bias it in that. If we can build our F&A, then we can run the program for longer and maybe expand it. But you know, some of them are expensive, absolutely. Cutting, well, nobody likes to talk about cutting things, right? You know, prioritizing, yeah. There's one over here. I'm just gonna I'm just going to hold on to this. Okay, all right. All right. Okay. There you go.
Thank you. I'm Tim Graham. I'm director of UNM's Institute for Medieval Studies. I was very happy to hear you mention the importance of universities engaging with their local communities through outreach. My institute does a lot of outreach, draws in large numbers of the civic community to our events. I wanted to ask you, based on your experience at Kent State and also what you envision that you might do here at UNM, what do you see as the role of the Office of the Vice President for Research in terms of encouraging, promoting activity in the arts and humanities?
Yeah, well, I see the role of the VPR as affecting outputs, okay? So a lot of people talk about money, and, you know, unfortunately, university reputations are often judged upon how much extramural funding comes into the university. You know, I don't really like to think of it that way because money is an input. And what the VPR really should be, I think, should be focused on are the outputs of the scholarly activities of the faculty. If some faculty need $1 million to do their work, then, you know, it's my job to help them try and get it. If somebody needs $5,000 to finish a musical recording, which was something that happened at Kent State, then it's my job to try and find those dollars. So what I'm trying to do is increase the amount of scholarly output and the quality of the scholarly output. And, you know, there are a variety of ways of doing that. Actually, I have a prop here, which I'm going to use. I never go anywhere without props. You mentioned medieval studies. So this is my research magazine. I started this when I came to Kent State. This is the 3rd edition, the 2015 edition. And what we try to do, I mean, this is dollar blind, okay? What appears in this has nothing to do with the amount of dollars that came in to support the scholarship that is in it. This is telling the outside world about what it is the university does and why it is that it's important to them. And so actually, I'm very proud of this. This is our centerpiece on Chaucer. We have a Chaucer scholar at Kent State, and we're featuring her indirectly, but we have the Chaucer Review. She's a co-editor of the Chaucer Review. So it's really about, you know, the public don't care. They don't care how much it costs to produce scholarship. They only care about how it affects them. And, you know, they don't know whether the research that Susanna Fine does to produce this cost $1 million or cost $1, and they don't care. So I see it as my responsibility to affect the outputs and to make it known to people outside the university what those outputs are. Because I think we do, as universities in general, we do a very poor job at doing that. I think I was saying this earlier. If I repeat myself, it's because I've already said this several times today. But, you know, I think there's so many interesting things that happen at university that we need to tell people about. And so if it's something as simple as a publication, then we'll do that. If it's a symposium, we'll run that. You know, if it's seed funding, if it's a way to, you know, I funded a musician or a director of the jazz program to, you know, to go to New York City and record as a group. You know, often those dollars go so much further in the humanities and the arts than they do in the sciences. But it's really about, ultimately about the impact that what we do has on the outside world. And frankly, it could be science, it could be the arts, it could be humanities. I'm looking for that impact. And frankly, I want the outside world to know about it. Did that answer your question? Okay. I'm going to get my exercise here.
No, it's okay.
Do my curls.
I think I need to speak into it for
the
record. My name's Melissa Bachavoy. I'm the chair of history. And it's a related question to Tim's. And I mean, one of the things that I often hear is that humanists or people in fine arts or architectural planning don't really generate any revenue, such as F&A, right? But we often win national fellowships. There's foundation funding. We have here on campus the Belinsky Foundation, which is now funding pre-doctor awards in the humanities, all right? So we actually do generate some income, not at the same rate, you know, in the same numbers, because in many ways our research doesn't cost quite as much. What have you done at Kent State or elsewhere, or what would you do here to really help with humanities initiatives that deals with the issue of output, but also helps facilitate humanities scholars who do creative works to find the money necessary, to not always necessarily come to you, right, and say, we need this,
Right.
need this money. Thank you.
Well, certainly you're right. I mean, the amount of dollars needed is often quite a bit less than in the chemistry lab, for example. We have a university research council at Kent State. My division funds that research council. It's about $300,000 a year. And typically in the past, they've broken that down into a pot that funds some summer salary for faculty, a pot that supports travel to conferences, and then a pot that actually supports small research projects, on the order of $2,500, $3,500, something like that. As a chemist, $2,500 doesn't get me very far. And as a scientist, it doesn't get you very far. But $2,500 or $3,500 can go a long way for someone whose research doesn't cost as much. And so what I asked the URC to do was to start kind of transitioning the types of proposals that they were supporting to support the arts and the humanities, because I just knew those dollars were going to go further than they were in this. I mean, I can buy a bottle of solvent with $2,500. It doesn't do me any good whatsoever. It's a question of impact. That investment has a much greater impact when you're funding somebody, from the humanities. Maybe it's $3,500 to host a visitor for a month. Maybe it's a little bit more travel than the $500 takes you. I mean, those sorts of returns on investment are often way out of proportion to the dollars that are actually put in, if that makes sense. So certainly, I recognize that, and again, this is not, F&A kind of runs the office. At Kent State, F&A runs the office. F&A runs the office here, from what I can understand. But it's not the whole university. If you relied, or if you supported only those things that generate F&A, then you're going to have a much less enriching atmosphere, or a much less kind of culturally diverse portfolio of disciplines at the university. And it really wouldn't be a university. That's what I believe anyway. Does that answer your question, or? Okay. Okay. I'm having fun with this.
I know you are. Thank you. I'm Barbara McCready. I direct the Center on Alcoholism, Substance Abuse, and Addictions at UNM, and I'm also faculty in psychology. So we've now had humanities, and we've had engineering. I'm going to do social and behavioral sciences. And I'm curious to hear your thinking about some of the real challenges that institutional review boards are facing these days, and how you've addressed some of those at Kent State. Thank you. Yeah,
for a while there, I was spending about a day a week on IRB in my role. So I can tell you about, I'll just describe the Institutional Review Board, Human Subjects Research. At Kent State, we actually have 3 IRBs, and they handle somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,300 kind of office actions a year. We have 150 or so level 3 full reviews, and probably about, it's split 50-50 between level 2 and exempt of the rest of them. And the protocols are all over the place. And so, there's a very large kind of swath of expertise that's needed on our IRB. So that's problem number 1. How do we actually get the representation on our IRBs that we need in order to, really adequately review the protocols and make sure that they are, guaranteeing safety and privacy. So that's number 1. Basically, we expanded, which made it even tougher to fill the IRB, but we've managed to kind of reach into a number of high volume disciplines, disciplines that generate a lot of IRB protocols, and we've gotten several champions there, and they're long-term, kind of long-term, incarcerated in the IRB. It's a thankless task, it really is. One of the problems, though, that we had very recently was our College of Public Health had an opportunity to access some state of Ohio mental health funding. And it involved homeless youth. And the question is, how do you actually consent a homeless minor? Okay, someone who is under the age of consent, who wasn't living at home, did not have a recognizable guardian. Now, the federal regulations allow you to do this now. Our policy register at Kent State did not. So our policy register, which was last updated on the subject of human subjects research about 12 years ago, was not only very uneven in its content, it was completely silent in some areas and overly prescriptive in others, but the prescriptive areas were out of date. And so what I did was I formed a policy subcommittee in the IRB, and I asked them to look at how we might change the policy register, because the policy register is more or less like Moses' tablets, coming down from on high. They don't change very often. So how can we go about doing this? What did we need to do? They came up with a strategy. We wrote a new draft policy for the policy register. I took it to the Senate, Faculty Senate Executive Committee, had it approved there. I took it to the full Senate, had it approved there. I took it to the President's Cabinet, had it approved there, and finally got it approved by the Board of Trustees. And what it is now is a much more flexible document. So it's not prescriptive. It says basically we're going to follow federal statute and federal policy and federal regulations. And it allows us now to be more agile. I mean, we can write our policies as we want, but it allows us to be more agile in writing those policies. So it was about an 8-month journey to get that done, but it really allows our faculty to be competitive with their colleagues in institutions down the road that weren't having any of those problems at all. So that was one problem, or two problems. I think a third one, I won't get into too many specifics here, but it involved an exercise science protocol, which was initially approved, but which I actually disapproved because I felt that it was endangering the health of the subjects. And I basically kind of bore the brunt of a lot of anger about that. But essentially it was, it didn't pass the sniff test. The sniff test is, how is this going to look as a headline in the Akron Beacon Journal, right? And it didn't pass that at all. It was really something that was draconian, I think. So, I mean, that was, at some point, as the institutional officer, I can't approve a disapproved protocol, or a protocol that's been approved by the IRB, but I can disapprove one that has been approved by the IRB, and that's what I did in that case. So, yeah, at some point you just have to use your best judgment and, rely on as much advice as possible. But those are kind of three illustrative examples of our IRB. Our IRB, I think, is, I don't know if it's unique, but, I've sat on IRB before when I was at WPI, and it was more or less kind of, here's the protocol, you discuss it, and you either approve or disapprove. And if you disapprove, it gets stamped and gets tossed back. And there's no further input that the IRB provides to the investigator. And so at Kent State, what we have is we have kind of a pre-review process where a protocol is sent to a subject matter expert before it reaches the IRB. That subject matter expert, looks for problems, gives advice. There's a new version created. It comes to the IRB. The IRB will discuss. The IRB brings in the investigators to explain it and to ask questions. And then, what we'll do is, if we don't approve, we'll say why we didn't approve it, and we'll suggest ways that they can, do the protocol if it's consenting or if it's other things, that will get it approved the next time around. So I think it's a very collaborative process that we have.
Okay. Hi, I'm David Scott, Associate Dean for Research in the College of Education here. I have a broad question, just in terms of what history you've had working with colleges of education, maybe what you see some of the opportunities and challenges there. And then a more specific question related to human subjects review, because one of the challenges that we face is the need to do more videotaping, more observation, things that some people define as more invasive, certainly more public in some ways with regard to trying to protect identity and so forth of subjects, but absolutely essential to be able, excuse me, to answer some of the research questions that many of our faculty have to try to be able to answer. So just if you could share that.
So from a research opportunities perspective, you know, Kent State it's late to the game, but they're starting to, you know, look more at STEM as an area not only for education but for research. Cognitive sciences and learning sciences is something that's really gained a lot of traction at Kent State. There's a lot of money out there in the federal government for supporting learning sciences, and it's a very multidisciplinary field. I mean, we've got College of Education faculty, we've got psychologists, we've got sociologists, we have a philosopher involved in the cognitive sciences. So I'd see that as you know, without knowing kind of the specific flavor of your college here, I would say that would be kind of maybe some low-hanging fruit. On the IRB question, we actually have a classroom, middle school and elementary school classroom lab in our College of Education. It's videotaped. We go through the consenting process very carefully with the parents. We make sure as much as possible that we're not identifying, and we're very careful about who actually sees the videotapes. So we don't go out selling videotapes to educational companies, for example. So, I mean, I think that there's a way to do that. It's just you need to consent properly, and you need to basically be following federal policy. And, you know, there are a lot of institutions that do this. So, yep. I'm getting tired. You can come on up.
I'm Mary Jo Daniel. I'm the Associate Director for New Mexico EPSCoR.
Okay.
And I grew up not too far from WPI.
Oh, really? Where?
Westboro.
Oh, really? I lived in Boylston.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Excuse us.
Yeah, exactly. So other than the obvious, i.e. the weather, what about New Mexico and UNM attracts you? Why do you want to come here?
Yeah, well, you know, the weather is a big thing. When I left yesterday morning, it was 20 degrees and snowing, and I hadn't seen the... What's that, sorry?
I said Ohio beats Boston, definitely. I mean, right now, Worcester is probably... Well, I shouldn't say this, but I would much rather be in Massachusetts than Ohio. It's just so cloudy there. But anyway, so, you know, when I left WPI, I left it because I found it to be a small institution, and it was pretty limited in its disciplinary range. I mean, it had all the engineering disciplines, had the science, it had a humanities department, which was basically a catch-all for art history, Spanish, English, any humanities or arts that you could think of was in a single department. And I was really looking for an institution that was broader. And, you know, Kent State is broader, as I started off by saying. The thing is, it doesn't have all of the pieces that I think you need to have in order to have a big impact on the region, on the world. I really do think, you know, so Kent State has no medical school, it has no engineering school. And I think that when you start combining medicine, engineering, the sciences, the social sciences, the arts and humanities. I have another prop here. Just bear with me here. I think it's in this one. Rats, it's not in this one. I have a picture of a dance program in here. So our dance in our College of Arts and how it actually is being used to help people who have learning impairments. But when you bring those together, I think you open up a lot of different possibilities for impactful research and scholarship. And so, you know, I find the University of New Mexico has more of those pieces. And it sure does have a better climate. No, I mean, I don't mean to be facetious, but I think it has the pieces. It's a larger university from a research perspective. And you know, it sounds like there's some exciting opportunities. So that's kind of why I'm here. Yep.
Thank you.
My name's Susan Atlas. I'm the director of the Center for Advanced Research Computing, which is the UNM Supercomputer Center.
Okay.
And I'm also research faculty in physics, and I'll mention that I'm a chemical physicist.
Okay.
So my question relates to supercomputing. So there's a national dialogue going on which is, relates to the fact that advanced computing, by which I mean anything beyond a desktop or the resources of an individual group, is becoming increasingly important across virtually every discipline in research, including even the humanities, and certainly biomedicine and so forth. So my question is, what's your philosophy of who and how that should be supported? In what context? Should it be IT? Should it be outsourced to the cloud? Should it be supported by the Vice President for Research? Thank you.
So the situation now at Kent State is we're part of a network, the Ohio Supercomputer Network, which is basically a resource that's provided by the state government. It's run through the Ohio Board of Regents, and it's available to any faculty or students that are at Ohio University, public universities. So I don't have a lot of experience with supercomputing on campus or being required to support it, and I'm not a computational scientist myself, so I don't have I don't have any experience with it. Let's put it that way. I think you have to look at cost. I think actually a consortium approach probably is the best way for deferring cost or spreading cost around. Having an individual institution, running its own supercomputing facility could be quite costly, and you probably, I think most of these facilities end up selling time anyway to other institutions. So it would seem if you're trying to get some upfront money to establish a center, it would seem that you'd want to form partnerships with other institutions in the state. I don't know what the supercomputing capabilities are at the national labs. Maybe there are partnership opportunities there, and certainly, more regionally, there might be some opportunities too. But I just don't know what the financial requirements are for a system like that. You're absolutely right, though. Big data is all over, and the analysis of large data sets is touching almost every discipline, from medicine to materials. There's the materials genome project that's out there now. So there are growing needs, and I think in order to be competitive in a research landscape, you really need to have access to that kind of capability, whether it's housed in the university or not. I just don't know what the costs are. But it certainly is something that's very important. Wow, that was fast. I have a couple questions though too. So.
Yes, my name is Ronald Kay. I'm retired staff from UNM. And last year, the Center for High Technology Materials laid off staff. And some of these people had been UNM employees with 20 years of service, patents, and an award from STC for innovation. Were laid off less than a year before they had planned to retire. So the question is, given that there are apparently immediate financial problems within the research environment, do you advocate privatizing some of the remaining staff, as has been suggested by the provost? And I'd appreciate your thoughts on that matter.
Well, I just wanted to say I was not here a year ago when that happened.
But it is a question of interest to remaining staff.
Well, I guess what I would want to know, I can't really answer that question, but what I'd want to know is, what are the financial burdens that, I understand that that is one of 4 centers that's actually supported through the Vice President for Research office.
VPR,
yeah.
They answered to VPR.
Yeah, okay. I had a kind of more general question about centers and institutes, and are there regular evaluations of center performances?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
There were no issues in these
Okay.
cases regarding that. So.
I would understand your concern about that, obviously, but it's not really a question I have any data I could base an answer on.
I guess I could rephrase it. And
sure,
that
please.
Is, given the financial stress that research departments are under, it seems that historically UNM has frequently looked to staff as an easy way to balance the book sheet. And some of these are people who are getting paid, certainly in the case of engineers, less than half of what they would be receiving in the outside sector. So, of course, a certain measure of employment stability is important to them. Sure. So the question here is, given the financial stress that, of course, you would be operating under, how do you approach difficult financial situations, and where do you look to achieve this balance?
I think that's a fair question, and you know, I have, boy, do I got financial stress where I am now. But you know, really, you know, I don't want to just be appearing to say something that you want to hear, but I really don't like the idea of staff cuts. I mean, staff are people; they're not staff. You know, I don't like the idea of people cuts. If people are you know, working in good faith on, you know, a job that they've been asked to do, then, you know, if there are problems, then I think it's up to the university to try and solve those problems in a way that doesn't, you know, severely impact the people involved. I can't, you know, if I were hired here.
That's a fair position in any event, in terms of how you approach it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't promise that there would be no staff cuts, but I don't. So, you know, when I was at Kent State, and I'm still at Kent State, but when I came there, I had 2 AVPs for research. And I didn't think we needed any AVPs for research. I thought, you know, not that I have this overblown sense of importance, but I didn't think we needed any other ones. And, you know, I eventually asked one to leave, and you know, he was with me for 14 months from the time I got there. He had 6 months of severance that we gave him. He got a job at Ohio State, so it was a fairly soft landing for him. The other AVP was actually a member of the faculty, and so he had a position to go back to. But I don't like the idea of putting somebody out on the street, because I wouldn't like that to be done to me either. So that's the only answer I can give you.
We've got about 5 minutes, and about 2 people, at least 2 more wanted to ask questions. So John, want to try to wrap it up?
People are cringing right now because I'm John McGraw from the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and I actually would like to ask about what I sense to be an issue, not a problem, but an issue in New Mexico, which is, as you know, a multicultural state. Mm-hmm. But the cultures all seem to me to have an equivalent view of research as a culture, which is there's a certain amount of learning to be done about the value, what research really is, and how it, across the board, benefits not only UNM, other universities, the state. In addition, there are smaller cultural centers, including, for example, the research support facilities and personnel within UNM. There is the state legislature. There is a board of regents, which is specific to the University of New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, have you considered how to address research as multicultural? Because the single biggest thing that concerns me is that I sense, as a research faculty person, that this university could be far better than it is. I get a sense of sort of, turn us loose, please. What do we have to do? What problems do we have to solve to become much better than we are right now? And I'm just wondering if you have considered any of this.
Well, I mean, universities have a variety of different constituencies, as you've kind of pointed out. I think ultimately, in order to, basically what we're being asked to do is justify the importance of research at the university. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people that aren't at the university who don't understand that research drives the economy, that research enriches lives, that research cures disease. There's a disconnect there. And I think it's really important for a VPR and for faculty and for other administrators to be out talking to the general public and to constantly be reinforcing what it is that we do in a research way that affects their lives in a positive way. I think the old management saying is that, if you want somebody to understand what you're saying, you have to repeat it 1,000 times. And I'm probably mangling that. You have to say it over and over and over again. And I think that's one thing that universities actually suffer from. We think we're all smart people here, and we think if we said something once, then everybody should understand it and believe it and remember it. And that's not the case. So I think I see the VPR role in particular, but also the president and the provost and faculty and deans. It's our responsibility to tell people outside the university why it is that they should be supporting us. Because ultimately, they are our customer. It's their tax dollars that are paying our salaries, and we better be relevant to them. And there are so many stories that we can tell the public as to why we're relevant. That's the exciting thing about a university like University of New Mexico or like Kent State or WPI. There are so many things that we do that, people will have these aha moments when we've been talking to them. For example, how many of you have one of these in your pocket? Okay, well, the flat screen, the liquid crystal display was invented at Kent State. We didn't do a very good job telling the world that, but those are the sorts of things that we need as universities to do. Our entire economy, our entire high-tech economy, but our economy as well, is really being driven by investments that the US government made in the American Research University after the Second World War. Everything that we have, all the lights, the power grid, my picture up here and the PowerPoint, everything has been driven off of the investments in research that the US government made. And the American people need to know that. And I agree with you. There are pressures all the time. Why should we be funding this? Why should we be funding that? Well, it doesn't matter in the short term, but 10, 15, 20 years down the road, if we haven't continued to invest in the American Research University, we are going to be a third world country. We are not going to have the technology advantage that we do now. And I think everybody in this room has to be telling people outside this university that, the value of the university. So it's a communication thing.
On that, would you please join me in thanking you?
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I'd also like to note that there on the vprsearch.unm.edu website, there is a place that you can leave feedback. We would very much like your feedback. The next public forum will be on Monday, and then we'll be having one the next week and the next week. So we hope that you'll continue to keep joining us. Thank you very much.
On that feedback form, just put A on it. Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.